I've been an emergency room doctor for 17 years. 17 years of chaos, blood, and split-second decisions that determine whether someone gets to see tomorrow. You'd think after all this time, I'd be numb to it, that I'd have built walls thick enough to keep the weight of it all from crushing me. But the truth is, you never really get used to it. You just learn to function through it. You learn to compartmentalize, to focus on the medicine and push everything else into a box you'll deal with later. Or never. Most days I walked into Mercy General Hospital in downtown Chicago at 6 in the morning, grabbed my coffee from the machine that always made it too weak, and prepared myself for whatever came through those doors. Gunshot wounds, car accidents, heart attacks, overdoses. I'd seen it all, treated it all, saved some, lost others. That's the job. That's what I signed up for. But on that particular Tuesday in October, I had no idea that everything I thought I knew about myself, about my strength, about my ability to stay detached, was about to shatter. It started like any other shift. The morning was relatively quiet, which in an ER is never a good sign. It means the storm is coming. By noon, we'd already handled 2 traumas, a stroke, and a kid who'd swallowed a handful of batteries. Standard stuff. I was in the break room trying to eat a sandwich that tasted like cardboard when my pager went off. Major trauma incoming, ETA 3 minutes, multiple vehicle collision on the interstate. I dropped the sandwich and headed straight for the trauma bay, pulling on fresh gloves as I walked. The adrenaline kicked in automatically. This is what I do. This is what I'm good at. The paramedics burst through the doors with the first patient, a young woman, maybe late 20s, unconscious, severe head trauma. We got to work immediately. I barked orders, checked pupils, assessed injuries. She was critical but stable enough for imaging. They wheeled her out, and I was already turning to the next gurney coming through. The paramedic was doing chest compressions. Bad sign. Another team took over. Then came the third patient. I heard them before I saw them. The wheels of the gurney squeaking against the polished floor, the urgent voices of the EMTs rattling off vitals and injury reports. I turned, ready to receive, my mind already running through protocols. And then I saw the face. Time didn't stop. Time never stops in an emergency room. But something inside me fractured. It was my daughter, my Alice, 23 years old, finishing her senior year at Northwestern, the girl who used to wear my stethoscope around the house pretending to be a doctor just like her dad. The girl who called me last Sunday to tell me about her new internship, her voice bright with excitement. She was lying on that gurney, her face covered in blood, her body broken, and I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. Every piece of training, every year of experience, just vanished. One of the residents looked at me, waiting for orders, and I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Dr. Brown, my colleague, grabbed my arm. Her voice cut through the fog. "Jack, step back, let us handle this." I should have. I knew I should have. You can't treat family. It's the first rule. But my legs wouldn't move. I stood there staring at Alice, at the tube they were putting down her throat, at the blood soaking through the white sheets, and I felt completely powerless. Someone physically pulled me away from the trauma bay. I think it was Brown. She pushed me into a side room and shut the door. Through the small window, I could see them working on my daughter. I could see the organized chaos, the same dance I'd performed 1,000 times. But now I was on the other side of it. Now I was the family member, the one left waiting, hoping, praying to a God I wasn't even sure I believed in. Brown came out 15 minutes later. 15 minutes that felt like 15 hours. Her scrubs were stained. Her face was serious, but controlled. "She's alive, Jack. We're taking her to surgery now. Dr. Ramirez is one of the best. You know that." I did know that. I'd worked with him for years. But knowing didn't help. Nothing helped. I asked what happened. Brown explained that Alice had been a passenger in her friend's car. They'd been rear-ended by a drunk driver going 70 miles per hour. The friend had minor injuries. Alice had taken the worst of it. Blunt force trauma to the chest and abdomen. Possible internal bleeding, fractured ribs, head injury. The list went on and I stopped hearing the words. I just kept seeing her face. I called my ex-wife, Daisy. We'd been divorced for 8 years, but Alice was the one thing we'd always agreed on. The one thing we'd both gotten right. Daisy's voice shattered when I told her. She said she'd be there in 20 minutes. The surgery took 6 hours. 6 hours of pacing the surgical waiting room, drinking terrible coffee, staring at the clock on the wall, and replaying every moment of Alice's life in my head. I thought about the day she was born, how tiny she'd been in my arms, how terrified I was that I'd somehow break her. I thought about teaching her to ride a bike in the park near our old house, running beside her until she found her balance. I thought about her high school graduation, the way she'd hugged me so tight and whispered thank you in my ear. I thought about all the times I'd missed, the recitals I'd skipped because of work, the parent-teacher conferences Daisy had attended alone because I was saving lives at the hospital, the birthdays I'd celebrated late because I couldn't leave my shift. I'd always told myself it was worth it, that my work mattered, that saving strangers was a noble sacrifice. But sitting in that waiting room, I would have traded every life I'd ever saved just to hear Alice laugh one more time. Daisy arrived and we sat together in silence. What was there to say? We held hands, something we hadn't done since before the divorce, and we waited. Other families came and went. Some received good news. Others didn't. I watched a woman collapse when a surgeon told her that her husband hadn't made it. I'd delivered that news before, many times, but I'd never understood it. Not really. Not until now. When Dr. Ramirez finally emerged, still in his surgical scrubs, I searched his face for answers before he could speak. He sat down across from us. She made it through surgery. We repaired the damage to her spleen and liver. The head injury is our main concern now. There's swelling. We've induced a coma to give her brain time to heal. I asked when she'd wake up. Ramirez looked at me with the same careful expression I'd used 100 times with other families. We don't know, Jack. The next 72 hours are critical. We'll monitor her closely. It wasn't enough. I needed guarantees. I needed him to tell me that my daughter would be fine, that she'd wake up and go back to her life, her internship, her future. But he couldn't promise that. No doctor could. I knew that better than anyone. They let me sit with her in the ICU. She looked so small in that bed, surrounded by machines that beeped and hummed, keeping her alive. I held her hand, careful not to disturb the IV line, and I talked to her. I told her about my day, about the patients I'd seen, about the coffee machine that still made terrible coffee. I told her I was sorry for all the times I hadn't been there. Sorry for choosing work over her dance recitals. Sorry for being too proud to admit that maybe I'd gotten my priorities wrong. I told her about the time she was 5 and had a nightmare about monsters under her bed. She'd crawled into bed between Daisy and me, and I'd promised her that I'd always keep her safe, that no monster could ever hurt her as long as I was there. I'd broken that promise. I couldn't protect her from the drunk driver. I couldn't protect her from any of this. Days passed, then weeks. Alice remained in the coma. The swelling in her brain was slowly decreasing, but she still wasn't waking up. I stopped going to work. I couldn't. How could I save other people's children when I couldn't save my own? I stayed by her bedside, reading to her, playing her favorite music, begging her to come back. Daisy and I took turns. We became a team again, united by our fear and love for our daughter. On day 19, her eyes opened, just for a moment. Just long enough for me to see that she was still in there, still fighting. I called for the nurse, my voice breaking with relief and hope. Over the following weeks, Alice slowly came back to us. It wasn't easy. She had to relearn how to walk, how to speak clearly, how to do basic things she'd once taken for granted. But she was alive. She was here. I eventually returned to work, but I'm different now. When I see a patient on that gurney, I don't just see a case anymore. I see someone's Alice, someone's child, parent, friend, love. I see the family in the waiting room, terrified and helpless, and I understand finally what this job really means. It's not about the medicine, it's about the people. Every single one of them matters. Every single one of them is someone's whole world. I thought I knew what it meant to be a doctor. but it took almost losing my daughter to truly understand.